Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all again. I'm going to wait a couple more seconds, see who else gets pulled in. I feel like we're missing some folks. All right. Well, it's good to see you all again. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Keely Simpson. I'm one of the regional soups. I'll be your facilitator tonight. We have David Roy. David, if you want to say hello. David's our note taker. And we have Jed Roberts here with us from Flow, who's going to be able to answer all of your data questions. So our task, you all just saw the questions. You saw the scenarios, the three options. So our task is to answer the question on how are stakeholders and communities affected by each of the scenarios, how are stakeholders going to be in support or opposition, and any other suggestions we have. So we have a Jamboard that we're going to record all of that in. But my question is do you want to have Jed go over that one more time and ask questions before we start hopping into the Jamboard and giving feedback? I see Caitlin saying yes. Anybody else? Do you want to refresh on what we just, hi Rita, on what we just went over, or do you want to jump in and start giving feedback on those options and suggestions in Jamboard?
I was just hoping we could see the slide with the bar graph on it. I'm a very visual learner, it turns out. And it wasn't in our other
Will you present that for us, please?
Awesome. And then I'll take a screenshot and then we can move on if it's just Caitlin that needs
No rush, Caitlin. We got 45 minutes for y'all to give feedback. So I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're giving feedback on. Jed, will you share your screen, please? Thank you. And you all feel free to start asking questions about this. I can tell you when I see it, when I look at the utilization of Hosford and Mount Tabor, that's what jumps out to me the most. And so feel free to start asking questions in terms of data and what this means.
So it seems to me that this was an effort to see whether it would be possible to fit Creston into Kellogg, and that this shows that it's not.
Why is it not?
Because it's over 90% utilization, and it's over 97% utilization in every scenario. And we know that that's not going to be an educational experience that really serves the students who attend the school.
So is that what we're saying, what Hosford and Mount Tabor are? Because they're above 90%.
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
I also, my other comment is that we apparently have forgotten that there's another middle school that'll be opening in this process that we're not even talking about. And in these scenarios, I'm assuming it's at like 50% utilization at Harrison Park, which is also not an equitable educational experience. So.
Well, I'm with Marissa on this as well, just because also what it doesn't take into consideration is the boundary shift that is to occur in phase 2, because at this time there's a lot of students within, like around Kellogg, literally in the 1-2 block radius, that are not going to Kellogg. So there's boundary shift that is going to occur in there. If in phase 2 that percentage doesn't take into account. So I also find it that problematic to have Mount Tabor over 100%. We know that they have been struggling, which is the same thing that Bridger had going on and working at over 100% capacity. And the quickest fix for Mount Tabor to be under 100% capacity would be to move the Spanish DLI program, which makes me wonder where it would go, which the most easiest solution would be to put it to Lent, which was against the community's feedback of specific racial segregation of the Spanish-speaking community for the Spanish DLI program. So I think it goes back to that phase 1 question that we were trying to evade at the beginning. And I think in some ways it would make PPS complicit in segregation again, because it's happened in the past. So Yeah, that's what I foresee. I agree with you, Marissa.
Martha, I have a question for you about the Spanish DLI program. And this is just me not being a part of that program.
Sure, Beth, thank you.
I know that PPS has said that the co-locating the DLI programs is helpful because it supports services. It makes those programs stronger. My question is, can we do that in 2 schools, or do we need to put everyone in 1 school? And if we do that, why are we not co-locating elementary schools too?
I agree with you. I have the same question with you, and I think that it would be, I think what's necessary, and what we all see as necessary, that there's the need for at least two Spanish DLI co-location programs. I completely agree with you on that, Beth. Yeah.
Okay, it just seems like that would provide a little bit more access. If we can locate Spanish DLI in a couple locations, then it gives families the ability to not have to transport their kid across
over
the
2
region.
freeways.
Yeah,
over 2 freeways.
exactly.
Are you talking about 2 middle school locations, Beth? Or
yeah.
So you mean Mount Tabor and Kellogg?
I guess it sounds like Kellogg is a good location, and I would lean on the Spanish DLI representatives to identify that. I just wonder. I mean, I think one of the concerns that I have is Harrison Park.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to Harrison Park because we're moving everyone out of that zone into Kellogg? What happens in 2022 when that becomes a middle school? Who goes there? Are we shifting people then back from Kellogg into Harrison Park? Because that doesn't seem like a good process for those students. And so I don't know. I don't know where the other middle school is. I don't know if it's, that again, I would ask for others. Mount Tabor is overutilized, overcapacity. We need to help. We need to help that school. I agree.
That said, I'm also with Marissa on it in that putting the charts that it shows right now over 97 or 90 something capacity is not sustainable, knowing that any time historically that there's a new building that opens, population or enrollment increases. So that would be putting Kellogg at over 100% capacity as well, which is just not sustainable over the long run.
Yes, I agree. We certainly don't want to, we don't want to get any school over 100%. And we all know that there's that sweet spot where schools are really working efficiently. I guess that the question that I have, so what the coalition submitted was that whoever we send to Kellogg now, they would be able to go there for the next 3 years because we're not going to move students out with the boundary changes. We are going to do boundary changes next year. So we know that there's a potential for Kellogg to be over enrolled if Creston goes in. We're talking about over enrollment for 3 years. And then the boundary changes become in effect at that point because those 3 grades will be out of that school at that point. Is that 3-year span worth pushing Creston out and not giving them an opportunity to have the chance at a middle school that PPS has said the middle school 6-8 is a better education than the K-8?
Well, I mean, we're talking about doing this year for Creston because Creston parents feel it's so urgent that it has to be done right now, this year, right? So, I mean, where is the equity there when like Harrison Park is not being turned into a middle school this year? Like, how are we not even mentioning that?
I agree. I agree with you. I definitely agree with you on that one.
It's really, really frustrating at this point, that it's like continually being ignored. This whole decision to have a phase 1 and a phase 2 to only choose Kellogg feeders in phase 1 has been, problematic from the start and is clearly just a way to placate certain people. And I just can't get behind that. It's not producing an equitable solution
at all. I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree.
We all agree. Hey!
I totally agree. I totally agree. I think that Harrison Park, Creston, and Bridger were definitely the ones that were identified as not moving forward. And that's a problem for all of those students. The Creston community was very outspoken. And so I think that's why we're talking about this, is because they're outspoken and the board heard that. I do think we need to speak up for Bridger and Harrison Park as well.
Well, we did come up with a solution for Bridger in the proposal, right? But again, no mention of Harrison Park. And the board doesn't seem to be hearing that from Harrison Park. So
I just wanted to turn your attention as well. This past week, a KGW article was published that voices some of the opinions of Creston families as well as other marginalized groups that I think would be pretty insightful. So that is available for all of you.
I'm going to hop in for a second and get us back to Creston and the three options that are on the table, because I know we can go all into phase 2 and we can talk about Harrison Park and everything that's going to go along with those changes. But thinking about those options, and I know we started talking about it, but it sounds like there's other suggestions, right? And that is something we're going to do on the Jam board. And so, like, I encourage you to start talking about other options. If options A, B, and C you don't think work and they're overcrowding 3 of the middle schools that are already at capacity, like, what other options are on the table? What else have you all thought through for options for Creston for next year? Martha?
Well, what I'm wondering is what we had decided to figure out in phase 2, in which redoing the boundary lines would balance out Creston a little bit more and be able to provide more solutions. I'm wondering if that balancing for the boundary lines can make it so that Creston can move forward next year with those rechange boundary lines rather than waiting another year for it. So I think part of the problem as well is that in redoing the boundary lines, we were saying that Creston would have to wait an extra year for those boundary lines to take into effect. So I'm wondering if we can say the boundary lines change that will be figured out in phase 2 go into effect for Creston for the next fall.
completely agree with you, Martha. I mean, what I appreciate trying to keep us focused, Keely, but it's not possible to just ignore all of the repercussions of it, you know, it's just not, you know, so unless you want to say that the Harrison Park and the schools that will feed to it are lower priority than other schools, if PPS wants to say that, then just be upfront about it. If we are actually sticking with our goals of racial equity and social justice, then I don't think that's possible.
No, Marissa, and it's definitely not what I'm saying. Our charge tonight is to figure out Creston for next year, right? Like,
Yeah,
we
and
feel
I
like
think
our proposal, and so like, what are we proposing, right? In terms of, you know, do we like option A? Do we like B? Do we like C? We don't like any of them, and we have a different alternative. And
well,
so
I think we already came up with a proposal that had a lot of thought put into it. I agree with Martha that, you know, boundary changes are a necessary part of all of this, and that I completely agree that Creston should have become an elementary next year, and we should be deciding on boundary changes this year.
I think one of the challenges that I see, and I appreciate the option of looking at the boundary change. One of the challenges I see, and I don't know how to get through this, is that I don't know how to do a boundary change that has to a school that has enough room. And I think that's the challenge I see, is that Hosford is already at, you know, 93, 95, whatever the revised is. You know, Kellogg is at 86 right now with the folks that we have in there. I don't know how to do a boundary change just for Creston.
Exactly.
That does that without looking at, and like we said, we should do all this at once, like Arleta and Marysville and Lent, and like all of that piece feeds into, you know, and then Harrison Park, and then we do the flip side of Powell and all of those schools. We know that Harrison Park needs students. We know that, well, I'm not sure about Lane now because of the access. We know that there's schools that are over and they're under, and I don't know how to do just Creston boundary change to make it work with the 2 schools that are around them. without sending Creston to Lane or Harrison Park, but well, Harrison Park is not yet. So
Well, I think that it would be, in my opinion, it would be more reasonable if you're saying like, let's have schools be over enrolled for these 3 years. I think it would be more reasonable to say like, to just, you know, come up with a boundary suggestion that makes some sense, that makes logical sense for Creston this year, that separates, you know, between Kellogg and Hosford, knowing that they're both going to be over enrolled for this period of time, and have those 3 grades continue, finish it out, but with possible small tweaks later. But there's like a pretty logical boundary that, you know, we could propose right now.
yeah.
I would also just like to add, like, I think that what's most important from my perspective as a middle school principal is that if we have Creston kids come to Hosford, that they're Hosford kids, and then that go with Hosford kids to Cleveland. So I couldn't tell if that was a guarantee, but you know, splitting elementary schools, it is what it is, but splitting middle schools is really hard on kids because you're only there for 3 years, you're coming or going, and you build that community, and it helps so much if they know they're going to be together the next 4 years. So yeah, I've said it before, but
well, yeah, no, I agree with that completely, which is again why I also am opposed to bringing all of Creston to Kellogg, because then that effectively eliminates the option for Harrison Park to feed to Kellogg or even any part of it. So we're making that decision as well by deciding to send Creston.
Wait, repeat that? I didn't understand that.
If we have Kellogg like so over enrolled, and we know that Kellogg will feed to Franklin, that we've already determined that Franklin continues to be over enrolled and there's no room to add any other feeders.
I see, as in for sure Harrison Park Middle School would not feed to Franklin. Now I understand. Got it.
Right now it goes to Madison.
Mm-hmm.
Curious.
Now it goes to Madison, which is much farther away, which is why we've been discussing for a while.
Just wanted Chris, Richard, John, Melissa, Regina, Kathy, like, would love to hear a principal perspective on these options for Creston.
So, oh, that's me.
Richard, you didn't want to talk?
I did. I had that article popped up that Martha so kindly shared with us, and an ad started playing right when I unmuted myself. You know, it had plenty of other times. I just wonder, when I look at schools like Tabor, that's 101%, and Hosford and possibly Kellogg, what does it actually look like when it's over enrolled? Like, is that something that they can sustain for 3 years, or is it something that's like not even sustainable?
Caitlin?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So essentially what you're doing is filling up spaces, because when you get more students, you get more staffing. And in a large middle school, so 600 plus, you really do have a lot of elective options, and your kids have, you know, enough core classes. But you're filling up spaces. So even this year we had to would have had to, but again, we didn't have students in the school, so not really a problem. But we would have had our teacher's lounge become a classroom, and our library would have had classes in it every period. So the one thing we haven't done is put teachers on carts yet. So what you would have is teachers that don't have a home teaching space. So they would travel and teach during different teachers' planning time. So you would have, each class would be filled for 6 periods every day. And so I have worked in schools where we had classes in the hallway, in the large hallway areas, but we haven't had to resort to that at Hosford. And we also do have several really large classrooms that we've kind of constructed, like, you know, sort of fake barriers in, so that we can run 2 classes in there on either side, which can be a little bit noisy. So those teachers have to really like each other, but we work it out. You know, we're definitely a school that's just grown a lot in the last 3 years. It's increased a ton every year. And so that's really good that people like us and want to come to Hosford. And I don't see the neighborhood enrollment dropping that much. Even during the pandemic, we haven't seen enrollment drop. I am worried about enrollment. I'm not worried about as much, like 25 students. So if like, where'd Jed go? There he is. My Brady Bunch. So like Jed, if you can say, you know, it's 25 students for 3 years, you know, that's it. That's the total and, you know, increase, then that's not as concerning. When I see the number like 101.3, I'm like, but we're already really big. So it's not as hard to absorb. I was wondering what Tabor's capacity number is right now. They're like, or is it on here? No, it's not on here for right now.
Yeah, they're just above 100%
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
So we'd be living that sweet Mount Tabor life for a little while. And
it seems like the realities of gentrification are really playing a role in which, you know, more people are moving out, you know, and then the schools closer in are getting under enrolled, depending on the areas. You know, we have schools like Llewellyn, Starwood Middle School is also over enrolled. Dunaway is over enrolled as well. But that's specifically more, for lack of a better word, what they would say in Spanish. I don't know how to think of it in a different way than Spanish. Prestigious areas, right? And that is considered more family friendly. But that I think that just, you know, it's all about the realities of redlining too. And
right. Yes,
redlining.
Absolutely, Marta. And we've also seen a huge increase in students coming to their neighborhood school of Hosford versus going to a middle school that is a choice or option school. And those applications have decreased significantly, which I take as a personal compliment. However, it has gentrified our school quite a bit, which hasn't been something I see as positive.
Caitlin, I'm wondering, in your experience, well, I don't know if you've ever experienced a middle school that is at 50% enrollment. Like, what is the experience like for, so Richard, what is the educational experience like in that scenario? I mean, because that's what we're deciding to do here, basically.
Yeah, I've been a principal at a middle school that was pretty low enrolled, and it's hard to get some of those electives in. It really comes down to the electives and having teachers having planning partners, because you can still sustain the school, of course, but you have less options when you don't have the economy of scale. The one thing that is nice though is you have a lot of space, so you can be flexible with that space when you're in that situation. But you do limit some of the options that kids have, and you do have teachers that are stretched a little thinner in those scenarios.
Yeah, you have to increase the number of preps that teachers have. A lot of times you'd have like a math teacher that also teaches gym or something else. And then also you might have electives that are 6-8 to use those classes and give kids more options. And so you might not have 3 bands like a 6, 7, 8, you just have band with no levels. So that's how it decreases that opportunity for kids.
Which is very similar to a K-8, right? So what you're talking about is more of a K-8 experience.
Without the extra space.
Yeah, I think we need to be honest, you know,
no extra space.
I just think we need to be honest about the fact that choosing to enroll Kellogg at this high that's what we are deciding for Harrison Park, that's what it'll be.
Chris, I feel like we haven't gotten to hear from you tonight. I was wondering if you wanted to jump in and comment on this discussion and our options for Creston.
I mean, don't have anything really else to add. I mean, I appreciate the conversation. I can speak to the bump. You know, anytime you do open a new school, there's a natural bump that happens. And so I would want to do everything that we can to anticipate that and, you know, be more proactive versus what we experienced at Franklin, which was being completely reactive. And so we are building new office spaces as we speak, just to, you know, because of where we're at with our over enrollment. So that is something that I definitely think that we need to continue to think about. And then I also appreciate Caitlin's response with regards to, you know, anytime you are splitting students at the middle school level and providing them different tracks for what high school that they go to, it it takes away that sense of community that you're trying to create. It takes away that sense of community that the high school is trying to establish with the middle school as well. And so I think, you know, as we're talking about that question, what stakeholders are impacted, I mean, again, our students' experience, we need to think about that and how they're going to school with someone for 3 years and hope building those relationships with hoping that that will carry over into high school.
Thank you. John, Kathy, anything you all want to add to the discussion?
I don't know what it's going to add, but it's been something I've been kind of poking around at the maps, looking at. It seems strange on the surface to take to move a group of students in a middle school to a middle school, which essentially prevents the students in the K-8 school that are in middle school to go to that middle school. That's what I'm talking about, the Mount Tabor Spanish program. By them moving to Kellogg, that means that the Creston middle school students can't go to Kellogg. That's one way to look at it. So what I'm asking myself and trying to find a place is, where could the Mount Tabor Spanish immersion kids go other than Kellogg? And I don't have an answer, but that's just a piece that I've been struggling with, trying to come up with. Like I said, it just seems odd that we would say, you can't go to this middle school because these other middle school kids are coming to this middle school.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Martha.
sorry. I think that, John, that's very true. And I think it's problematic for sure, but then it makes me wonder, how do we practice equity within those discussions, knowing the history of PPS, right? How do we do this decision in an equitable fashion, knowing that there's ripple effects that affect in the long run? Is the hard truth is that one movement or one piece has such a great effect on various communities, and to add an equity lens to it makes it even harder. Okay, that's just the reality. And it makes me wonder if are we gonna do, are we willing to do what's right for the numbers, or are we willing to do what's right? Actually, it makes me wonder, how can we do what's right for the numbers and for equity? And I don't know if I have an answer for that.
And I don't think I have an answer either. Well, if we had an answer for Creston for the following year, that would make it easier for me to see this bigger picture. I guess I keep coming back to the same problem of, as we're trying to solve a problem that is a big problem, involves a lot of pieces with only part of the pieces. In other words, so next year, what is a possible solution for Creston? Because I don't see that either in everything that we've come up with. So it's complicated to me to understand how we could come up with a solution without broadening what we're looking at.
Thank you. Kathy, Regina, Melissa?
I was thinking similar a little bit around John, and I don't have an answer for it either, but wondering how we broaden it out. I'm thinking about non-neighborhood students who might be taking up spaces at the other middle schools that we're talking about, having the overcrowded middle schools. Maybe, I don't know, Caitlin, if there's a lot of transfers into Hosford. You know, we talked about in that option B, which really didn't limit the numbers anywhere, but not allowing the non-neighborhood students from Arleta, Lent, or Marysville to continue into Kellogg. But what about, could we open more space at other middle schools if we expanded that moratorium? And then that would give Creston, which technically could be a neighborhood, to Hosford. Because again, I agree with John, like, well, how are we not allowing neighborhood schools to have a middle school experience? And I think, and Martha, you alluded to this too, there's a legacy of allowing this option or choices or privilege to choose where you want to go that has then excluded some, is often an out, you know, an extra addition to that. So that's all I was thinking. Sorry,
cute kid in the camera. We gotta say hi to the cute kid. We're all like, all the teachers are
Hi.
deprived of seeing
Hi,
cute
pretty girl.
kids. So we're like, hi, cute kid.
So I guess my turn to speak. I want to say that I have trust in our process and Southeast Guiding Coalition, and we've been doing the hard work, and I think we'll continue to do the hard work. And we came up, not seeing all these different bar graphs. We thought through a lot of this stuff and came to a decision. Every single time we do this, we're going to make hard decisions, and the next guiding coalition, whoever that is going to have to make hard decisions. And when that decision happens, I mean, it's great that we're checking to see if there is any other options, but I'm a little nervous that we're always going to be whoever is on the guiding coalition is going to be questioned and be second guessed. I feel like we're doing some second guessing right now, and we've spent lots and lots and lots of hours thinking about this. So I'm okay with the fact that we're taking a second look, but I'm also want to recognize that, I mean, looking at the numbers for me, it says we made the right choice. And when we do our next section, I have trust in the people who are sitting in this room that we will work, as we've already started this evening, talking about what's that next step that we should do and how do we help the next school. Creston is not the only K-8. There's K-8s all across our district. So unless we're going to get rid of all K-8s next year, I mean, there's going to be some K-8s, right? And it's just we just have to keep taking the little, a bite at a time and keep moving forward. So for me, what I see in the data is that we made the right choice. And I know it's a hard choice, and I know it sucks for Creston. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, but I think that we made the right choice with our decision.
Thank you, Melissa, for acknowledging that. Regina?
I agree with a lot of what's said. I guess part of my wondering is probably a question for Jed in terms of clarity. In the utilization numbers projections for the next 3 years with any of the scenarios, I'm presuming that those numbers, I guess my wondering is, does it account for potential program shifts? For instance, Hosford is over 100% utilization with those scenarios, but does that account for Chinese DLI potentially moving out? Because what I see is that if we make decisions based on Kellogg, that number is probably going to be what it is, that percentage, if not higher. But then it does not account for potential shifts to boundaries and other enrollment decisions upon Mount Tabor and Hosford. That obviously would be made at a later time, and not during this time.
Right, Regina, and I can confirm that, yeah, those estimates don't include any kind of movement taking Chinese DLI out of Hosford. It's really just centered on the Creston students.
I definitely don't want to cut the conversation short. But at the same time, we also have Jamboard to give you all an option to capture your own individual thoughts. And I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to do that. Because once we go back into the large group and share out, we won't be back in this Jamboard to capture your feedback. And so I posted it in the chat. You all may have also gotten a link. It's in the chat. So if we could just because we're going to go back into the main room in 10 minutes. And so I just want to give you all an opportunity to capture your individual thoughts on those 3 questions. About
and
the impact.
Keely,
Yes,
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Megan jumped in as I was taking notes and started converting some of those notes, since we weren't in Jamboard, into Jamboard. And then I followed up and did more of that. So that's why you all will see a lot of sticky notes already in there based on the conversation and comments you've had. If I've missed something, then please go in and correct whatever you'd like that is attributed to you.
You'll notice in the Jamboard, page 1 is question 1, page 2 is question 2. Page 3 is where you can put any other suggestions that you have for Creston. So I just want to give you all some time to do that, because in 9 minutes, we're going to get pulled back into the main room. And so are you all good with taking the next 8 or 9 minutes and putting that information and your thoughts into Jamboard? Or do you want to continue talking and let David capture notes? I just volunteered David.
I would like to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead, Beth.
So let's assume that we move forward with what the coalition proposed before, and that Creston stays a K-8, and that we move that decision to the boundary shift. We've also said that the students that go to Kellogg will stay at Kellogg, so 6th, 7th, and 8th. When we shift the boundaries, how are we not over enrolling Hosford and Kellogg also at that time? Because Creston still has to go somewhere. So like, where are the student, like, that's not changing. So what I see happening is that we look at this boundary shift and we say, well, wait, we don't want to over enroll Kellogg and Hosford again, which I agree with. I don't want to push them out. However, because we've made the agreement to the students that are there, now Creston will change in 2027 or 6, because we have to wait for that whole group to go out. I mean, Creston has to go somewhere, and it's either now or it's in 2022 from what we've said.
Jed,
A boundary shift is not going to change that.
I'm wondering if Jed already has some thoughts on that and some data and predictions on what that would look like. Jed, do you have that?
Right. So it's a really good point, Beth, that, holding for the next 3 years, the students that are at Kellogg, does put some limitation on what you can accomplish with boundary adjustments, right? But, we're going to have space cleared at Lane Middle School with access moving by 2022, right, by that year. And I think what everybody's been saying is spot on about this is a more holistic view, and recognizing that there is middle school capacity in Southeast for the amount of enrollment that we have in Southeast. It's just a matter of, in the long term, getting that enrollment balanced through program placement and boundary adjustment. So I don't know that it's, something that happens overnight, right? With some of these decisions that needed to be made to get Kellogg enrolled. But as we move forward, yes, we definitely, make those assumptions around the students that are, going to be at Kellogg for the next 3 years, and see what that looks like in the 4th year, right? Which is importantly when these enrollment, when the boundary changes really start to do their work.
But for the next 3 years, we've essentially frozen the Kellogg, right? Like it is at least at 86%. So if we, so whatever happens to Creston, we will only go higher for at least 2 years, right?
Yeah, and we've seen other, other districts, make some policy around allowing students to opt into what is eventually going to be their school earlier on. So that can sometimes mitigate for it. There are enrollment policies that can be applied to help move this along a little bit quicker once boundary changes are in place. So that's something that will need to be considered.
Thanks, Jed. I still want to give you all an opportunity to, who is that? I'm sorry.
It's me. It's Regina.
Oh, Regina, go ahead.
I was wondering, would now then be an opportunity to then also potentially recommend that students not in the Kellogg feeder cohorts be excluded to further lower the percent utilization rate? Is that an option or a recommendation to be added?
Yeah, if that's directed to me, that was one of the last things that Judy mentioned in her slide there, was around, sort of a moratorium to guard against kind of that new school effect. So that is something that we've seen other districts do as well. And it was something that the advisory team did talk about and want to offer as an option.
I just wanted to just throw in 2 cents that I just in looking at like the futures of Harrison Park and the next phase and thinking through it, it doesn't seem like Creston's problem, that's not the way to say it. It doesn't seem like giving our Creston middle schoolers a robust experience happens unless we put them in a middle school. And I know that sounds just like, but yeah, like they need it. And here I am saying that even though I'd be over enrolled. So I'm going to mute now.
All right, my facilitator role is to time check us, which means we've got 4 minutes. I see Chris smiling because he knows I was going to do it. We've got about 4 minutes, and you all have not gotten into Jamboard yet. And it's not that the Jamboard is a task to complete, but I just want to make sure your thoughts are captured. And so it's in the chat. There's a link in the chat. And so I just want to make sure you all have the time if there's something you haven't been able to share, or if what you shared, you want to make sure it gets written down. And so can we just spend the next couple of minutes with you all capturing things? I did also want to make sure, I know Director Moore is here to see if Director Moore wanted to make any comments. It's okay if she wants to pass, but she is here with us and has been listening. Director Moore, are you going to talk to us or pass?
Well, I guess I will say one thing. One of your options is to stand fast with the proposal you presented. You've got an option D, which is, we told you what we said. There you go. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but you need to know that's an option.
Well, and I'm going to be honest, I'm texting with other people in other groups, and it seems that other groups are going with that option too. So just because it seems that that's, we thought about this long and hard, really hard. We put so many hours into this. So yeah.
I appreciate you saying that, Martha. And I know Melissa said the same thing. Like, we've spent many Thursday nights together to get to where we were in the original proposal. So
can I reiterate something I said at the meeting that most of you didn't hear? Because I hope you didn't spend your Tuesday night on PPS stuff as well, your Thursday night. I am enormously grateful for everybody's work. I've been doing enrollment related stuff for about 12 years, so I have some clue about how hard this work is. And I am grateful for the recommendation that you came up with. I think it is a very solid proposal. I know you have looked at dozens and dozens of different scenarios, and I want to honor the work that you've done so far. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to phase 2.
thank you, everyone. We're going to get pulled back. So I'm definitely going to tap Marissa and Beth and Martha to share out for our group and our discussion. So hope you all are ready to share. And then we will be back in probably, I think, 15 minutes after the break to really debrief phase 1 and how that went. So thank you all for the conversation. And Beth, Marissa, and Martha, y'all are up next. See y'all.
Can I skip on that?
Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to shift gears. And now we're going to reflect on the process that we spent a lot of Thursday nights on. And so we have 2 options. We can do both or choose one. We do have a Jamboard again. And I know that David was kind enough to put a lot of our conversation in the first session into Jamboard for us. So we can have open conversation about how to improve phase 2. And David can continue taking notes for us, or I can post the Jamboard in the link and you all can give your feedback that way. So what are your thoughts on how you want to talk about debriefing phase 1 and improving phase 2? Jamboard or open conversation with David taking notes? Use my teacher wait time. Somebody, anybody.
I like the open conversation. That way I don't have to read type what I'm writing and then also try to read what others. So, and also I trust David in his role as note taker.
Thank you, Chris. And look,
Melissa.
with Jamboard, the fact that my handwriting is so bad doesn't matter. so that my people can read my post-it notes when we use Jamboard. So I'm happy to do it.
Melissa, I think I saw you shaking your head. Are you good with that too? Got a thumbs up? Everybody's good with us just talking through it and David capturing our notes? Perfect. David, you're up.
All right.
All right, so let's just talk about phase one. Like what could we have improved or done differently in phase one as we're closing it out tonight?
I think the first couple of weeks, as we go back to whenever we started this process, there wasn't a whole lot of clarity. I think by the third or fourth meeting, we started to get a little bit more clarity and traction. And so if we have a very clear focus at the onset, I think that will greatly help and improve the process.
Can I add on to that, that I think it's really important I think when we had clarity is when the board members came and really spoke to the goals that they wanted us to accomplish. So I think that that would be helpful again to start that out and not wait till, like you said, a couple of meetings in to have, that way we can really ask them questions about the goals that they have set for us.
Thank you. Martha, I think you wanted to jump in.
Oh, my internet is glitching. Can you say that again? Sorry.
No, I thought you were ready to talk after Melissa. I thought you wanted to give us some feedback on phase one.
Oh, I have so much feedback. I'm not shy enough.
Go for it.
I think, thank you, David. I think some of that feedback would be just having a clear guideline of what the goals are and like a standard of what it's supposed to look like. It just feels like the goals in phase one kept changing, which meant that our process kept changing as well. There's a clear need for Native speakers of specific communities to be represented, or BIPOC folks. Clearly, I do not represent all of the Spanish-speaking community, and I don't want to be the person. That's a lot of weight for BIPOC people to carry when they're representing the whole entire community, just saying. So I would love to see more Native speakers of other programs that are being represented. Like I'm thinking specifically Lent, missing a Native Spanish speaker for the community. Atkinson is missing a neighborhood. Bridger is missing a Native Spanish speaker from the Spanish-speaking community. Marysville, I think, is missing some too. So there's specific individuals that I think can be easily identified, and that active recruiting needs to go into place with that. I secondly would love to see, or thirdly, so I don't know, I lost count. I would love to see more feedback from the community, more opportunities for the community to provide feedback, kind of like those Zoom meetings that happened. I know that that was rough and it was a lot of work, but I would love to hear back from other communities. And then I would love for materials to be translated on time. So it's not 2 days before the meetings and you have to go through 9 weeks of materials. I think that's just a basic, and actually by federal law, you are required to do that. And I think I would love to hear also from teachers, not parents that are part of the Southeast Coalition that are also happen to be teachers in different schools, but actual teachers who work with the students on an everyday basis and that know their building, that are there every day, that know what is needed for their students from all specific focus areas like DLI, neighborhood, SPED programs. We need teacher voice. We are so missing it. It is crucial to me to hear from teachers personally. So, and I'll stop there. You got that all, David?
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for reminding us that we need more teacher voice. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And can I just add on that I think there's more staff than just teachers in the building. So I would say include all staff, not just teachers. As a previous educational assistant, I'm going to speak up for them. They have a very great voice that we never listen to. So.
Popcorn out, Caitlin.
Thanks, Keely. So, as a principal in this process, I would say some feedback that would be helpful is to make sure that our role is shared clearly with our communities, because I think that because we are an advocate for our community, we were seen as you need to advocate for your current community in this setting, versus I think what was tasked for all of us is to also look at everything and advocate for our most marginalized communities. And that sometimes wasn't seen favorably by the communities of some principals. I still feel close to mine, but I know that that experience didn't happen across the board, and that can lead to just a lot of misunderstandings out there. So that was maybe something I think that could be more clear.
Thank you. Regina, Richard, Kathy, John.
I just agree it would be, it always felt a little out of balance, the amount of administrative and sort of analytical people compared to families and parents, and like you said, staff members and other people affected in the community. So I just somehow getting that balance, getting more parents involved. And I really think a barrier to that is the timing and the process and the languages available and all this for these meetings. I don't have an answer for how to make these meetings more accessible for families. And yeah, I don't have an answer, but I'd like to figure out how we could do that. The timing, switching it up. I'm not sure if it always has to be at the same time every week. I know that helps for planning, but that really leaves out a lot of people, especially, I don't know, it's a virtual world, but can we still offer some kind of childcare options or something? It really limits how people can participate.
Just to add on to that, there's interpretation options that we could have using Zoom. Our PTA uses those. And there's no reason why we couldn't be doing live interpretations during our meetings.
Ooh, Melissa, I love that. And it's so easy to do. I think a bunch of the PTAs, including Atkinson and Bridger, went together in a Zoom account, and that has made it possible for all of us to provide full interpretation of all the PTA meetings and every single meeting that we hold, including focus groups specifically regarding the Southeast Coalition that was planned in partnership with the principals, between the PTA and the principals, which has been super helpful. Now, that was by choice by the principals and by PTA, so it makes me wonder which other schools did not have the ability to be able to do that as well, which means that they were not as involved in this process, right?
So that brings up as something as a principal, and I think for, consistency, I think it would be great if PPS helped principals with making sure that we have clear messaging to our communities and that it's timely. I know that we got a couple of messages, but it wasn't consistent. It wasn't after every single guiding coalition. And so each principal had to come up with their own message. So I would love to see us be more consistent with our messaging and be able to differentiate based on the schools. I think that would be really important and helpful because it does take up a lot of principals' times. I would say on a weekly average, I probably, with this evening meeting and all the other things that go along with it, I would say it's 8 hours a week working on Southeast Guiding Coalition things. And so that's on top of our regular job. So any little things that can help us streamline the process would be helpful.
Thank you, Melissa. Just out of curiosity, like in phase one, are there things about phase one that you all think went well? Is there stuff that we did in phase one that you're like, we should keep doing that in phase two? Because I know we just kind of naturally dove into what we need to change, but I'm wondering, are there things that have gone really well in phase one that we need to keep as we move into phase two?
Yeah, Keith, I'd say once we narrowed the scope of what we were going to do, and I get it, it left out a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed still. So I don't want to undersell that, but it felt like it was all over the place for the first half. And the second half felt like we actually started making some progress once the scope got narrowed, being that there are still many things that need to be addressed in phase 2. But just having those clear goals was super helpful.
Okay, so what I hear is phase 1 was more effective when we had a clear vision, purpose, and expectation for what we were doing on Thursdays. So that was good. We just need to start phase 2 with the same level of focus is David, did you capture that? Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I got it. And there was early on, there were a couple of comments similar to Richard's. Like the first 2 weeks, there wasn't much clarity, much better after that. Next time, more clarity at the outset. I guess some clarity is inherent once you get going some, but we should be more intentional about that. And then we got clarity also, I think someone commented, we got more clarity once board members showed up to explain goals. And so we should do that earlier next time as well, as far as something structural that we could change.
I think also when we set the groups, and so you're not trying to get to know new people every single time, I think that is really helpful too. So when we set the 3 set groups where you knew the people and got to know people, it was much easier to go quicker with the work instead of spending a whole bunch of your time trying to get to know the new people that are in the room.
And I'm going to ask this it's my own selfish question. Because for a while I was the floater and I floated around a bunch of different groups, and we had a lot. Like I think we started out with 5 or 6 groups. So my question is it better to have 3 bigger groups or the 5 smaller groups?
Well, I think there needs to be some combination, because I actually feel like it's valuable also to hear different perspectives at times, so it's like if you get being stuck with the same groups the whole time, I think you only hear the perspectives of certain school communities and then you don't really learn about others. So I think there's value in both. Sorry to go back to like kind of things that could be better. I just wanted to have a couple comments. So, I mean, I had commented on the survey that I thought that there should be representation of each like racial or ethnic community from a school like that is representative of some certain percentage of that school, like that, so for example, like at Harrison Park, that would mean like 5 different representatives from these communities. But the thing is, in trying to find these representatives, when people are low income and have kids and don't have childcare, they're like, people would ask me, do you get paid? So people can't afford this kind of commitment without compensation. And so when that's not an option, when that's not available, like it's just, we're so limited in the people who can participate. So.
I totally hear that, Marissa, and I totally agree. And I'm one of those that, even though I'm an immigrant and English is my second language, and I'm highly educated, and my partner is white, so he's somewhat more privileged within our income, because that is effective. If pay became available, I would be more than happy to give my portion of my pay to make sure that other people in other communities are able to participate in this, because their voice is just as valuable as mine is. And I fully agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't suggest, offering pay to those who can afford to volunteer, but, that is the only way really that we would be able to get representation from all the groups that we want. So.
I think one of the challenges that I've seen as well is that I know some of the coalition members tend to be a little bit more introverted or quiet. And so the big group discussions where we're like, let's report back, we're not hearing from everyone. And so to provide different ways to engage with multiple people that have very different ways of presenting, I think we would hear a lot more voices. So I think that like the Jamboard offers another option. So if someone feels uncomfortable presenting in the group, they can do that. But I think I mentioned that at our last meeting, is that it really it puts people on the spot, and sometimes it's a pretty emotional topic, and we're going to get into even more emotional topics with boundary changes. I also think if we were to get a consistent way that the information was presented, that would be really helpful. Like I know that when we started coming up with scenarios, like some included a graphic, some didn't, some included charts, some included descriptions, some didn't, and it was really hard to piece all of the information together. And we already have a finite time to review it. And I realize why. I appreciate that, but it would be nice to be able to get a little more consistency to make it a little easier on the folks that having to review it.
I just want to say thank you.
Oh,
go ahead, Caitlin. We just have 45
I just want to
seconds,
throw in my 2 cents that this small groups being recorded, I appreciated that the small groups were not recorded all along because people are watching the YouTube recordings back, and I think it made it really high pressure for people to report out, and that was one of the pieces that I would suggest that we move forward with not recording small groups going forward.
Thank you. We only have 25 seconds left in this group, and I just want to say thank you all for all the Thursday nights that you've given us. And we're going to see you all again in February. So thank you, and we'll see you in the main room here in just a few seconds. So thank you.
Keely, I just put a link. I'm so sorry. I just put a link to the debrief form if anyone hasn't filled that out.